Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited to meet you and learn all about your books. This is Brian D. Anderson, author of the Godling Chronicles. Did I pronounce that correctly?
The Godling Chronicles. Yes, that was my inaugural series.
Okay, so maybe you have many more series by now. So where do you want to start on this journey?
Well, I can sort of tell a little bit about myself. I'm what you call a hybrid author in the truest sense of the word. That I have independent works out. I have traditional works out. I work with a franchise. So I do a little bit of everything. I started out with the Godling Chronicles back in 2010, 2011 as an independent author. And that was back before that was during the indie explosion when things were just really starting to happen for indies. And a lot of people who are coming out nowadays, they won't remember how it was back then, how we were just being hated on by every time you opened the Guardian, there would be an article about how people like me were ruining literature. And there was no resources at the time. We couldn't find cover art editors, qualified editors, things like that. But there were a few of us who just persevered, made it through, and we were able to build a name. And some of us, guys like Michael Sullivan, David Dalglish, moved on to the traditional world. Hugh Howey was one. Matter of fact, I saw Hugh not too long ago at Dragon Con. I moved into the traditional world later, and after the success of the Godling Chronicles, I got an agent, and I wrote another indie series, but she got me a small audio deal for the Dragon Vein series. That was a 5-book series. Then I co-authored with a guy named Stephen Saville, who wrote for Warhammer, Pathfinder, Doctor Who, Sherlock Holmes, things like that. We did a series called Akiri, and that was, like I said, the still in the indie realm, but we still doing traditional deals. Then Audible offered me quite a bit of money to do a sequel to the Godling Chronicles, and so I did that. I did a series called The Veil, and that was The Veil didn't actually do as well as I'd hoped. But it was outside of my normal genre. It was more like post-apocalyptic sci fantasy model, and the story was kind of modeled after RPGs that I enjoyed playing. But it was one fantastic series. It was about that time I moved into more fully into traditional publishing. Did a trilogy with Tor Books called the Sorcerer's Song series. First book, The Bard's Blade, A Chorus of Fire, then The Sword's Elegy. And did all three of those. Then I've done some work for the Conan the Barbarian franchise. I've written some short fiction for them. Going to be doing some more short fiction, possibly some episodes of Savage Sword, the graphic magazine, and maybe we're looking to do a novel as well. So that's kind of how my journey went, how I got started, and everything I just told you is, of course, about 12 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that is a lot of books for that amount of time.
I think 25 at last count.
Wow, congratulations. That's so exciting. And so you said the one sci-fi fantasy series or sci-fi series was a little bit out of your genre. So I'm assuming that your genre is full-on fantasy, right?
I typically do high epic fantasy, but I have been moving away from that. A little, not entirely. I'll always write fantasy because right now I have kind of my fantasy magnum opus that is being edited right now that we're going to be shopping. That is like 225,000 words, book one.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a massive story with two continents. I'm having to write a companion book that details the lore and the history, and so I'm still doing that. But I'm also working on a space opera
Oh,
with three other writers that we're just about to the writing stage. We spent the past year having weekly Zoom calls, and we have like 100-page story Bible, and we're just finishing up the outline. We're about to start primary writing, and I'm working with Sebastian de Castel. I'm not
okay.
sure if
Yeah, he was
he's.
on our show.
Oh, right, great.
Yeah.
Sebastian's awesome. I'm working with Troy Denning, who used to write for Star Wars. All his old books are now Star Wars Legends, but he's currently writing for Halo. And Mr. Dayton Ward, who writes for Star Trek. And so we've all gotten together and created this new, basically created a franchise, but created this new series that we're hoping to launch. Um, well, it really depends on what who we go with publishing wise, and how we're still weighing our publishing options. We haven't shopped it yet, so because we still got to have a little bit more in line. But yeah, so I'm doing both, and I always will be a fantasy guy. And there's nothing that ever. My love of fantasy is so deep. Um, it really started with Lord of the Rings, like a lot of writers my age. We all started there. That's why you see a lot of similar themes behind certain writers, throughout their works.
Okay, well, yeah. So I'm a high fantasy, epic fantasy lover, and I would love which series do you want to tell us about first? Do you want to tell us about the Godling
Well,
or
yeah,
your most
I
recent
could
one?
tell you the Godling Chronicles. If you were to read that first, you would see an example of my early, more amateur style writing. Where I do a lot of information dumps. I avoid using the word "said" because I was listening too much to creative writing instructors, and and nothing will ruin your prose worse than a creative writing instructor. I'm kidding, of course. To anybody, I don't want any angry emails. But no, you can tell how that my skills as a writer have developed from there. People still love that story, and the way it came about is I used to just write for fun, and I wasn't really taking it seriously. But I was writing these little quirky little short stories and stuff like that. Trying to be clever, trying to be edgy and clever, rather than like having stories like having Jesus be the one that set up John the Baptist to be murdered. And I'm like, well, that'll set people off. And I'm like, yeah, that's edgy, but it's not a story. I mean, it's it'll there's no there. So my son came up with an idea for a novel at 7 years old, came up to me and he said, Dad, I got an idea for a story. And so I peeled myself away from what I was doing. I said, tell me about it, son? What he told me was completely awesome. Matter of fact, the prologue of the first book of the Godling Chronicles is action for action what he told me that day.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
and it's also why it's a YA fantasy, because I didn't want to put anything in there that would be uh, um, that's something that I wouldn't want him seeing. There's some violence in there that I wouldn't at his age I wouldn't want him seeing, but it's fantasy. Um, and so I was like, yeah, I'll write it, and it took off. And then it was just an amazing story, and to this day, people still buying it, still digging it, despite its flaws. And Uh, then of course there's Dragonbane, which is more adult. It's a 5 book series. In 2015, the audiobook was nominated for a fantasy book of the year on Audible. But this has a lot more edge to it. This is truly an adult novel. Then my traditional stuff. If you want to see an example of some of the fantasy I write now, Sorcerer's Song is a great way to gauge that. The Bard's Blade is a fantastic character journey. Rather than the large stakes I had with my previous fantasies, this is more individualized. There's still a lot of the tension, still big stakes, but small action. It's like you're not there's not these big sprawling battle scenes. It's more an assassin trying to kill somebody, that kind of or that type of intrigue. And but it's a wonderful tale, and if you like character driven narratives, and also take a big swipe at fundamentalism, and which I love doing because they never get mad because they don't read.
Okay.
I mean, they read one book, but no. I'm not taking a shot at religion, but I'm taking a shot at fundamentalists,
Yeah,
the snake handlers.
well, especially from coming from the Bible Belt,
Oh
I mean,
yeah, oh yeah, oh man, yeah. It's just you can't avoid it here, that's for sure. And you're what, South Georgia, right?
yes, right.
So,
Born
uh,
and raised, so you can't get it out of it.
but yeah, that's a good example of my journey. Also, when did the short for Conan the Barbarian, that was probably as grim dark as I'd ever written, and because I always considered Conan sort of the a kind of a precursor to what grimdark became, the sword and sorcery aspect. And Robert E. Howard's character, I've always loved him. um, he's very misunderstood in modern times because people try to look at a 1930s character through a 21st century lens. And but even doing that, realizing that Howard wrote all his Conan stuff within a span of 10 years. He committed suicide when he was 30 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, he was, so everything he accomplished was between the ages of 20 and 30.
Wow.
And he created a genre, yes, largely based on Lovecraft and as far as the mythologies go, but what he did was amazing. And if you look at the character, if you actually look at the source material, you realize as the character gained popularity and he was freer to do the things he wanted to do and wasn't as dictated to by the magazines that as he wasn't, initially. You have a character who a lot of the women go from ornaments, around his leg, help me, to characters like Belit and Valeria, and I mean, these women with a lot of agency that they were heroes in their own right, and so that's one thing that's misunderstood about it. He wasn't just a brute barbarian. He 9 times out of 10 tried to think his way out of a situation. He detested weakness, but he always protected the helpless. He was honest even that it might cost him his own life. I mean, so the values of Conan are often overlooked because everybody has this way they think about him, and half the time it's without having looked at the source
I
material.
was gonna say, yeah, if you haven't like really dug into it, then you can't really judge, right?
Right, but you can't judge it by the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I love that movie. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely do. But it's not it's not an accurate example of that character. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I read
right,
so many retellings of things, and then I think, did I even remember what really was the original? Like Peter Pan. So many people rewrite Peter Pan, and there's so many takeoffs on that. I was reading one, I was like, do I even remember like what Peter Pan? I mean, like I'd read the short version when you were a kid, but have I read the
yeah.
real? So I went back and read Peter Pan, and I was like, okay, You know,
Well,
let me get a
another
baseline
example
here.
would be Wizard of Oz. I was recently on a panel at Dragon Con of the 80th anniversary of the movie, and
Mhm.
but the people in the crowd knew 10 times more about the Wizard of Oz than I did, and I had just not out of the not 10 minutes before that panel in the same room I'd done a Conan the Barbarian panel, so I went from that to a Wizard of Oz panel. I'm like, okay, so but if you look at the source material, things like that were happening. One thing, if you ever next time you watch the movie, notice that the witch gives you a line that says, "I'll send some bees to soften them up," and then nothing happens. Well, in the book, she sends a swarm of bees after them. Then you have the wolves that are or is it a bobcat or something that the gets its head chopped off. The Tin Man chops its head off. I mean, there's some brutal adult things in this beloved children's show.
Yeah, that's what got me started on fantasy because my grandmother bought me like the 13 book series of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And like one of them's about the Tin Man, and one of them's about, all the different characters. And there were so many different characters in there that don't even get touched on in just the one movie or the short story that you read as a kid. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean
that's what started my love of fantasy.
the world that was set up there almost begs to be explored. It's like there's a whole history that's still shrouded in mist that want to go discover it, which is wonderful for a writer. It's because you can but it can and you start delving into the world of what's canon and what's not. And like, is this fan fiction or is this not? And like with the Conan stuff, what I'm writing is canon because the IP is owned by Heroic Signatures, and they're the ones that hired me to write the story. But there's some people who will look at it that Howard didn't write it, so it's never going to be canon. And but I love worlds like that. I love worlds like the Wizard of Oz that even if you enjoy doing fan fiction, you can explore and have such a good time um, building off what the original creation was. And some of the characters, and I always thought the flying monkeys were just underserved as a
Yeah, I
whole.
mean, what was the motivation for the flying monkeys? I'm not really sure. Right?
Well, maybe what was the motivation? I never understood the witch's motivation other than power. Of course, I did have a theory about that it was all a plot by Glinda. I mean, think about it. She brought Dorothy, kills Wicked Witch of the East with her house, sends her off to kill the Wicked Witch of the West, right?
Ooh, yeah.
And even though almost sends her basically on a suicide mission, and does so unapologetically, but we'd have to kill her to get her broomstick. Yeah. So off they go, and they succeed. So she has that. So now she goes to Oz to get home, and the wizard accidentally flies off without her and leaves Oz. Who's the only powerful wielder of magic left? Glinda, Darth
Ah.
Glinda. It was a plot, I'm telling you.
I think I believe you. Have you ever read Wicked though?
Who? A
Have you
Witch's
read
Tale?
the book Wicked?
Oh no, no! I know they're doing a movie.
Yeah, they're doing a
Um,
movie. So I didn't read the book and I haven't seen the play, but I think I'm going to see the movie so I can figure out what people talk about when they talk about the
yeah.
story of the Wicked Witch of the East. But that's sort of a play on that too. I wonder if it's like similar.
The only other thing I heard is there was some controversy around a fan poster or something like that. I'm like, I don't know what that's about. I don't keep up with that kind of nonsense. But I've heard it was very good. I heard the play was excellent. I've never heard anything bad about that at all. There was one called Tin Man. That was like a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries,
Yeah, I think I remember that.
and the story was fantastic. It was really good, but really deserved a better budget. It was one of those things that deserved a little bit more money put behind it because it had so much potential. I always kind of likened it to the Highlander. The Highlander had all this potential, but it was such a low. But I think they blew all their money on having Sean Connery there.
Yeah, probably.
you know, um, but yeah, it was really good. You can I think it's on one of the streaming channels. I think Paramount or possibly Amazon. It depends. It's on one of those. It's worth a watch.
Yeah, I think I saw it advertised, but I haven't watched it yet, so I'll have to check that one out. So when you get engrossed in these worlds, how do you write? I mean, it sounds like with this group you're writing with, you're making an outline. Do you
Oh yeah.
do that for all of your books?
I used to not. I used to be almost a pure pantser, and what I've learned over the years that it's not a good idea if you have an expansive world. You end up having to go back and correct continuity errors and like then you'll have a character that you need to have him reoccur or her reoccur, but you don't remember where in the story they were originally. So now you're pouring through hundreds of pages trying to make sure things match up, and just keeping track of everything becomes exceedingly difficult. Um, and so I try to give at least a base level outline. Um, Now, what we have been using to plot the books is the Save the Cat method. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. We've been
Yeah.
sort of doing an amalgamation of the novel, Save the Cat writes a novel, and the original, or the updated, with the for screenplays. And I'm really enjoying that method. I'm seeing how beneficial it is. I don't think I would probably get more detailed than that because I do like a kind of a free flow. But I need to know where I'm going because when I don't, and that's what I end up causing me problems later. And also, what I'm bad about, and I'm trying to get better about over the past few years, is keeping a map. And because it's a lot of this stuff I don't draw very well, and it's time consuming, and so I get lazy, and I'm like, oh, I'll do that later, and I'll do it later, and later becomes um book two's are coming up. I'm like, I still ain't got a damn map.
You want to? Yeah, I have my maps printed, and they're like, well, this is a bad printing job, and you could see it got water spilled on it, and
that
yeah,
that's
but
that looks
like,
like a
yeah.
Rembrandt compared to the stuff I made.
Well, obviously that's not hand drawn. That's like, okay, I'll draw on top of another map.
Well, I mean, it's one of the things challenging is I remember early on some of the things that I had to learn, and I'm sure you can relate to this. How far can a horse travel during the course of a day? If I'm going from town A to town B, and town A is 75 miles away from town B, how long does it realistically take me to get there?
But like probably 2 days, I
Two
would.
days. I mean,
Yeah.
but what if it's 500 miles? How long is it going to take me to go 500 miles? With horses,
But
pulling a
is your horse
wagon.
magical now? Yeah, that's when you just make it a magical horse.
I mean, pulling a wagon. What if I'm on foot, going across country? All these things, and it has to make sense because even though we're writing fantasy, you still have to obey certain physical laws. I mean, you can still, and that's where I think you see a lot of these portal systems come in because you know writing the travel can be on big epic tales. I mean, it gets tedious. I mean, and so you're having to put these big things. Well, and the travel was uneventful, blah, and you saying that enough time that because you just want them to get there, and it becomes problematic. That you see a lot of writers will Robert Jordan did it with that portal system that he put in on Wheel of Time. Um, you've seen you see it a bunch of different ways, or somebody's just can all of a sudden find a way to fly. You know, I mean,
Yeah, so that's funny. Like the last book I did with my editor, like she sent it back to me after the first round, and she was like, "The first 10 chapters are boring. You gotta." She was like, "They travel too much." And it's only a 20 chapter book. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like half the book that I had to like. Okay, they don't need to fly on the plane. Just show them when they get there.
Yeah, right. Unless something happens. I'll tell you who does a wonderful job. Trace Parker and Matt Stone, the South Park guys. There's a video online of them going to these students at whatever college or NYU, I think it is there. Or anyway, and they were explaining their storyboard, and it made a lot of sense. And I've noticed that the parts of my story where people where I know readers have lost interest kind of match with what they're talking about. So it kind of lets me know that they're right, because we all make mistakes as writers.
Yeah.
If you have an action, this happens, and between each two events, there should never be and then. It should be this happens, therefore this happens. This happens, but this happens, therefore this happens. It's not this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens. So you're with this continuous stream of unconnected events, and that the reader's like waiting for the payoff, you know,
Right.
and
Why does it
like,
matter? Yeah.
and so there also this happens, so this happened. You can create new questions, because all we're doing is creating a little mysteries, and then then the solution, and then the answer to the mystery.
Right.
But with the answer, you can create new mysteries. And if you look at your story in that context of setup and payoff, it really helps you connect the fibers of your different plot points together.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, and I'm a big Save the Cat lover too. So.
Oh, I love that. You know what? Sebastian is the one that turned me on to it, because of course he did. Oh, he's a brilliant man, but sometimes it's hard to follow him. He thinks in some wild directions.
Yeah, his latest book, and I think he's writing a sequel to it. It was like half vampire unicorn. I don't know. He pulled like
The kangaroo vampire. Yes.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. Last one of his I read was The Malevolent Seven.
Okay, I heard that was really good too.
It really is. Sebastian's books are not beginner fantasy, though. I mean, I tell you, they are definitely. He puts a lot of intricate thought behind his magic systems. There are definite rules. There are definite. It's a definite system. It's its own thing, and everything follows. It's definitely a hard. It's definitely, I keep using definitely, but it is a hard magic system in every sense of the word. And if you're first of all, if you're 35 years old and your favorite book is still Harry Potter, you need to read more books. Don't get me wrong. Harry Potter's awesome. It had got more kids to read than Dr. Seuss. So I'm all for things like that. However, it is a very soft magic system. Magic works because it works. Sebastian's systems are not like that, and I enjoy them. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, you're definitely going to love it.
Yeah. So how would you place your books in between this Harry Potter and Sebastian hard magic then?
Well, I would place it on the hard magic side, pretty near what Sebastian does, but on the intricacy levels, nowhere near it. there's a definite cost. There are definite rules. There are definite things you can do, definite limits that fall firmly inside hard magic system. Um, Answering the question, I've yet to adequately answer the question what magic is. Like in Dragon Vein, magic is more, falls in line with more of a scientific thing because this is Dragon Vein is a sci fantasy, and you don't know that until later, and later into the series when you start to realize what magic actually is created through the energy of this planet that has special properties. Being that I don't have a science background, I didn't really explore what that was. So I kept, but it was hard magic system with soft science fiction.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Well, that was
Yeah,
loud.
yeah, it's okay.
I
Yeah,
didn't mean
but
to do that.
it's okay. Yeah, I can barely hear it on this side, so
I thought I closed that window.
no worries, no worries. Yeah, it's
Oh,
funny 'cause my husband is a sci-fi guy, and he like very early on, he's not much of a reader, but if he reads, that's all he reads. Very early on, he's like, "Oh no, I'm hard sci-fi." I'm like, "No, no, no. Take all the technical stuff out and just give me the story."
well, that's the reason up until recently I haven't tackled a lot of sci-fi. Now I did do Talos, which is dystopian sci-fi, but I don't really, there's not a lot of science behind it that I need to know because I'm telling it from the perspective of a character that's not scientifically
Oh,
minded. So you know what he knows, and doesn't know. If he doesn't know why it works, you don't know why it works. So he's just you're. That's one way to sort of get past that. But if you're doing things like The Martian, if you're doing like these hard sci-fi, oh, I've stayed away from that because I just don't have the science background and the sheer tonnage of research it would take is just beyond anything I care to do. I do not care to do that. Um, it's but I enjoyed The Martian was fantastic. I love how people say it was original though. I'm like, no, no, it's Castaway. It's Robinson Crusoe. It's yeah,
yeah.
but that doesn't mean it's not its own thing. But actually got into a debate with Todd McCaffrey a couple of months ago, and McCaffrey's son about this. I said, "There's really nothing. Anybody who tries to be original, just quit. You're not gonna. We've been telling stories for 12,000, at least 12,000 years, and the odds on you coming up with something that nobody else has come up with are just almost none." And because what we do is we tell old stories in new ways. Now, like I said, The Martian is its own thing. Nobody's done exactly that, but Castaway was that. He had to survive by his wits and escape. And Robinson, it goes all the way back to Robinson Crusoe, back into any kind of stranded person. And if what that's why we have, and that's one of the things that I've noticed lately that I'm not really appreciating is people coming getting down on the tropes. I'm like, the tropes. I love the tropes. I mean, if you don't want to copy every Tolkien. And nobody needs a bunch of eternal know-it-alls for as far as elves go. But having elves and dwarves and things like that in fantasy is what made us fall in love with it to begin with. What if you don't like? Oh, a kitty. If you don't like the tropes, what do you like about fantasy?
So when you do a new project, do you research like what other people have done in that same genre, like
Mm,
before you start, or do you just go out on your own?
well, I start with a story before I start with anything else. I'm of the opinion, I'm one of those guys that really believe that. Okay, do you ever watch Battlestar Galactica? The new
I've
one?
watched it maybe once, not a
Okay,
lot. Yeah.
okay. Battlestar Galactica, to me, is a very wonderfully told story that is character driven. That you could take that story and put it in the Old West, and it still works as a story. You could put it in the 17th century. You could put it in multiple different settings, and it works as a story. So I am of the belief, and there's a lot of other schools of thought on this. I think Robin Hobb is one that says anybody tells you there's a right way to do it doesn't know what they're talking about. This is my way of doing it. I come up with a story that I think really works, and if it sticks with me, I start exploring how it unfolds, and maybe I'll jot down some outlines, some plot points, and if that sticks with me, maybe I'll write a chapter or two and see. And if that sticks with me, then I dive in. But 9 times out of 10, somewhere along that line, it flies apart. Something about it doesn't stick. If it can only be a fantasy story, I don't tend to want to write it, because I want the story to be able to translate across genres as a story. And I think if you manage to find something like that can do that, you have something special. And not everybody likes what I do. Some people, some people love my work. Some people think I'm the worst thing to happen to fantasy since, I don't know. I was going to say something, but I'm not going to.
Sliced
Some people,
bread, right? Sliced bread.
well, yeah, I was going to invoke E.L. James. But hey, I wish I could come up with something like that. It'd make me millions of dollars. Uh, but anyway, like I said, for my part, when I have something like that, it makes me want to explore it more, dive into it. Now, where I struggle is with getting things more onto the adult level where I want to be content wise. Now, um, I grew up in the 80s reading sci-fi fantasy from that era. What's considered YA today would have been just fantasy in those days. So I want to reach a younger audience, so I have to put in content that doesn't necessarily come natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, like in the Barge Blade, the sexual content's all fade to black, and I don't necessarily. I know I muted that. I swear to God.
I
um,
know.
no, but all the sexual content is fade to black, and no, it's muted. But the violence is still there, and it's not that I'm squeamish about it. It's just I'm one of those, if it doesn't serve the story, I tend not to want to put it in there. A great example in the first Akiri novel, Akiri has to infiltrate a palace dressed as a male prostitute, so obviously I'm okay with adult themes. And the sex scene, I do not fade to black, because it's part of the story. It's kind of hard to have that as part of the story and not include the sexual activity into the tale. But if it wasn't important to the story, I wouldn't have. You know, and I think I struggle with that, and I don't give enough. You know, I tend to back away from that sometimes when I probably shouldn't. You know.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, all my fantasy is strictly YA. I think that's how my brain thinks. So I just go with it. But yeah.
And I think YA has been a wonderful way to keep young people involved in fantasy, and keep older readers who don't like the direction of some of the more edgy stuff able to keep having some new material without having to go reread a bunch of stuff that they've already read. I mean, how many times are you going to read Magic Kingdom for sale? I mean, have you ever read that?
I haven't, no.
Oh, it's Terry Brooks is one of his early works from back in the 80s.
Okay.
I actually met Terry a couple of years ago, got to sit on a panel with him. Super humble guy, just a sweetheart. Oh, we were on this panel, and the it was me and Terry were the only two published authors on this panel. The rest of them were indies, and some of them like indies with like one or two titles to their name, complete unknown out of left field. But there's nothing wrong with that. I wasn't, but the guy that was sitting in the middle wasn't Terry Brooks, and it should have been. I wanted to lean over to the dude who was sitting there and said, "Dude, you really need to get up. Terry Brooks is on stage with you." You know what I mean? And I want. I mean, I didn't want to talk at all. I just wanted to listen to Terry talk. You know what I mean? And they wouldn't shut up either. I'm like, look, you're on stage with Terry Brooks. You have an opportunity because Terry's old. He's not going to be around forever. And even if he is going to be, even if he lives another 20 years, he's not going to be doing these kind of shows for a lot longer. You know what I mean? These kind of things are very taxing.
Yeah.
And you're going to sit there and like eat up all the time and all the space when a literal legend is on stage with you, and he wasn't even at the table. He was sitting off from the table because all the spots were, and he refused to take my seat. I was on the end. I said, "Terry, please take my seat." He refused, sat down in there and goes, "Nope," refused to get up. I'm like, so the two published authors on this panel were at the end over here. And I'm like, oh my God. I don't know where I'm going with this story, but it just
Yeah, I really liked Mary Stewart, The Crystal Cave, and all her books about Merlin too. I don't know if you've ever read her, but
oh yeah, yeah. You know, there was that was with Morgana Le Fay was an Arthurian mythology, right?
right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was
It's more Arthurian, yeah, legend and magic, yeah. So
yeah, yeah. A lot of people don't know in the Arthurian legend that the sword, Excalibur, that was actually not part of the original mythology. That was Galahad found the sword. He had to go through a maze in order to find the Grail. At the Grail, one of the things he had to do was pull a sword from a stone, and it was never what they well, I guess it is when it becomes that, but I love Arthurian myths. They and the way they've grown over the years. Matter of fact, I was on another panel with that was talking about Guinevere and how that character had changed. The perception of that character had changed over the centuries and over the decades, especially in modern media. How she went from sort of a harlot betrayer to, um, you know, a sympathetic character to, in some cases, a hero, like what they did with the movie Arthur, that she didn't actually betray Arthur to with um, Lancelot, but she sort of flirted with him for a second and backed away. I thought that was a wonderful way to handle that because of the way they were handling her character and what Guinevere meant to different during different time periods, and how it also reflected the way women were being treated during that particular period.
yeah,
Um,
that's interesting. Yeah, the different interpretations.
so yeah, anyway, I love all those mythologies. I thought probably the most tragic character was Igraine.
It was who?
Igraine,
Oh, okay, yeah.
Uther Pendragon, Arthur's mother.
Hmm.
Yeah, she got the short end of the stick, poor girl.
Yeah, it's funny because I read so much and I get so much caught up in my own like stories that sometimes like little things like that are just lost. Like I had to have to think about it a really long time.
I have this weird thing. I just remember all this stuff, and it never leaves me. And it's annoying sometimes because especially if you start talking to me about something that I've read, and I have this encyclopedic knowledge of it, and I sound like I'm being a know-it-all. I'm really not trying to be.
Well, that probably helps in your world building and your series.
I tell you, if people who are interested in world building should check out Brandon Sanderson's he did some recordings online of his master class over at Brigham Young, and they're absolutely free. Um, there's world building, there's character development, there's about 10 or 12 different free online lectures, and they're about an hour or so each. I recommend to everybody. When I give when I give a world building lecture, it's basically just a rendition of what he's doing, because he does such a wonderful job at explaining what we all know as writers, how what because we're all doing a version of the same thing. You know, we all understand world building, but for somebody who's new, and it can be so daunting, especially they get really proud of the world, and they want to tell everybody all about it. They don't realize that you got to kind of use that iceberg method. There's all this stuff that's about the world. The reader is up here, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a reader the expert in your world. But what kind of learning curve are you putting them on? Is it a shot? Is this? Are you doing it the way? Going back to Harry Potter, you learn about the wizarding world as Harry goes through it. You know that you, and then there's stuff like the Wheel of Time, and actually more like the uh, Black Company, stuff like that, where they put you on the steep curve, where they put you in the world, and you don't, and they're not telling you anything, and you really do have to pay attention to learn about it. And so, how what what kind of curve are you putting the reader under in order to, number one, match your style of writing with that, and can you comfortably do it and still keep the reader engaged? That's that's going to be what they say about fights. Styles make fights, styles make writers. You know, I mean, what works
Yeah,
for
you
you?
have
What
to know like the expectations in your genre, because
mm,
if you like really diverge from what people are expecting when they buy your book, then they're going to be like, oh no, this is not what I wanted. So
yeah, and you better be, yeah, and in that case, you better be brilliant.
yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, I mean, if you're going to go outside of what people expect, you have to produce, and you have to give them something that they didn't know they wanted. And that's a tall order for any writer. Yeah. I mean, I don't usually try to do that. I mean, I don't have that um high opinion of my own ability, high enough of opinion of my own abilities to take those kind of risks on something that I'm working for months and months and months to produce. You know,
Yeah, that would be a
it's like
risk.
certain content that you don't approach because yeah, there's some riskier stuff I'd like to do, but I don't. It's not worth my career. You know, I mean, there's certain subjects I won't touch. I think important subjects that I'd like to, but if I do, then I'm risking alienating. So I'm risking upsetting people, and it's just not worth. It's not. If you want to know why some writers stay middle of the road, is because it's not worth risking our career. You know what I mean?
Well,
That
yeah. I mean, if what you're doing is working, then
yeah.
yeah,
Then
you
why don't
maybe
you
have
take
to
some more? Why don't you take some more risk? I said, because I like being a writer, and I don't want to go. I don't want to go back to digging ditches.
find some other outlet for those.
Yeah, there's other people doing all that. I'm not one of them. I tell you though, I do think what we do is important, more important than a lot of times we're given credit for. And I have good reason to say this. Back when I started, I had a fan from over in the UK, Helen. She wrote me about this foster kid that she had, and how my stories. She had some genetic and psychological issues, and she was on the spectrum, and but and she was been kicked out of a bunch of special schools. The story is very long and difficult to tell, so I'm not gonna do it here now. But it kind of boils down to through my books, her behavior changed, her life improved, and yeah, in ways that I'm just thinking I'm writing fun stories. And here comes somebody along comes somebody who takes what I've written and it has a deeper meaning for them. And then there was another young man who wrote me. Uh, he was had to go through. He wanted to be in army intelligence, and he's thin and frail guy, but this is what he wanted. And he still had to make it through boot camp, and it was nightmare. It was a nightmare for him. And he tells me by reading my books at the end of each day, because he would be so sore and so tired that he couldn't sleep. And reading took his mind off how much pain he was in. And he said without it, he wouldn't have made it through. And you hear things like that. And no, I'm not building a better mousetrap or finding cures for new diseases, but we do impact people in positive ways. And yes, we're entertainment. But entertainment's important, and I feel grateful every day that I get to wake up and do this. I know you do too. Most writers we do. We just I can't imagine doing anything else. And if you want to know why I don't risk my career,
You like it.
because number one, I don't think I'm qualified to do anything anymore. I've been doing this for so long. Oh my goodness.
Well, yeah, I mean, fantasy is not only entertainment. I mean, any kind of book, but I think fantasy in particular can be a great comfort to a lot of people, and it can also like help us explore maybe some of those harder topics through a safe way. Whether it's death or faith or just any like fitting in the world or how we relate to each other or trying to understand war and people's you know, hate, greed, envy, any trying to understand human nature, right? I mean, we all that is woven into fantasy.
Yeah, well, fantasy we can cover. That's one thing I do like about fantasy. Like in the Goblin Chronicles, I tackle bigotry and racism but it's literally two different races of people, elves
Right,
and what I mean. I don't have to insert myself into a situation that I'm either treading on dangerous ground or unwelcome. And so I can tackle these what I consider to be relevant issues um, from a safe space, from a safe, and still cover the themes, still be thematic without being specific.
right,
And that's one thing that's wonderful about sci-fi and fantasy. Well, like with the sci-fi what we're doing right now, um, me and my co-authors. I have no intention of describing any of the characters beyond their size, height, things like that. You know, I'm going to allow people and because we're talking about a future different planet, we don't have to drag the baggage of the 20th and 21st century along with us. We can um, focus on other issues without having to. We can still have humans, we can still have this and that and the other, and a lot of the things that are familiar, without some of the things that you know I think we would probably be better off. I know we'd be better off having left behind.
right. Well, that's really neat. Yeah. Well, I look forward to. I'm gonna dabble in all your series now, so I'm super excited. Tell everyone where we can find you, where we should look for your book.
Author BrianDAnderson.com, or if it's you can just Google Brian D. Anderson and I pop up everywhere. There is a actor, his name is Brian D. Anderson, and I bet you he hates my guts. But hey, you know what? He's taller and better looking than me. Hell with him. Um, I get the name recognition. He gets the looks. fair trade.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can find me there, and yeah, Googling my name is the easiest way, I think. But author Brian D. Anderson, I have that same author Brian D. Anderson on Instagram, but don't bother. I don't Instagram. You can best way if you want to keep track of my work is to go on to Amazon and follow me, follow my author page, and you'll be notified when my new books come out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've so enjoyed our talk. And yeah, if you have another book release, please come back and talk to us.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much.
Have a nice night. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.